Behind the grand stone walls of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets whisper through ancient corridors, a single moment would change everything. It wasn't the sound of trumpets or the flash of cameras that marked this particular Tuesday morning. It was the soft click of polished boots on marble floors and the rustle of a simple coat being adjusted against the autumn wind. Carole Middleton had visited the castle dozens of times since her daughter Catherine became the Princess of Wales. But today felt different. Today, she wouldn't use the familiar side entrance reserved for family members. Today, a uniformed guard would escort her through the main ceremonial entrance, the same grand doorway used for heads of state and visiting dignitaries. From her private sitting room window on the second floor, Queen Camilla watched this unusual scene unfold below. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips as she observed something that protocol books had never quite prepared her for. The mother of the future queen consort was being treated with the same honors typically reserved for foreign royalty. What had changed? What conversation had taken place behind closed doors? And why was Carole Middleton, a former flight attendant turned successful businesswoman, suddenly being afforded such unprecedented royal treatment? The answer lay in a series of events that had begun 3 weeks earlier, events that would reshape the very foundation of how the royal family viewed tradition, duty, and the delicate balance between public service and personal loyalty. 3 weeks before that memorable Tuesday morning, Carole Middleton sat in her elegant kitchen at Oakacre, the family home in Bucklebury, stirring her morning tea with deliberate precision. The September sunlight filtered through the French windows, casting gentle shadows across the granite countertops where she had prepared countless family meals over the years. Her phone buzzed insistently on the marble surface beside her favorite royal Worcester teacup, a wedding gift from Catherine and William that she treasured above all her fine china. The caller identification made her pause. Private Secretary to Their Royal Highnesses the Prince and Princess of Wales. It was barely 8 in the morning, and official calls usually came through more formal channels during business hours. Carole set down her spoon carefully, her businessman's instincts immediately alert to the unusual timing. "Mrs. Middleton, I apologize for calling so early," came the crisp, professional voice of James Crawford, William and Catherine's private secretary. "However, their Royal Highnesses have requested a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. There's been a development that requires immediate family discussion." Carole felt her stomach tighten slightly. In her years as the mother-in-law to the future king, she had learned to read between the lines of royal speak. Immediate family discussion meant something significant had happened, something that couldn't wait for the usual monthly family dinner at Anmer Hall. "Of course, James, when would be convenient?" she replied, already mentally reviewing her schedule for the day. Her party planning business, Party Pieces, had 3 major events this week, but family always came first, especially royal family matters that seemed urgent. Would this afternoon be possible? Perhaps around 2 o'clock at Kensington Palace? The Prince and Princess felt it would be best to discuss this matter in person rather than over the telephone. After confirming the appointment, Carole spent the morning in a state of controlled anxiety that she had perfected over the years. Michael, her husband, noticed her distraction as she absently rearranged the same stack of Party Pieces catalogues 3 times while they shared lunch. "What's troubling you, darling?" Michael asked gently, reaching across their small dining table to cover her hand with his. After 35 years of marriage, he could read his wife's moods like a familiar book. "Catherine and William want to see me this afternoon. James called personally, which never happens unless something's wrong." She looked out toward their garden, where autumn roses still bloomed despite the changing season. "I keep thinking about all the possibilities. Has something happened with the children? Is there some protocol issue I've unknowingly violated?" Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly.
"You've never put a foot wrong in all these years, Carole."
"Whatever they need to discuss, we'll handle it together." The drive to Kensington Palace that afternoon felt longer than usual, despite the familiar route through London traffic. Carole had made this journey countless times since Catherine's engagement to William in 2010, but today the weight of uncertainty made every mile seem significant. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a navy blue dress with a matching jacket, elegant but not overly formal, paired with pearl earrings that had been her mother's. Professional enough for serious discussion, but warm enough to remind her children that she was, first and foremost, their mother. Upon arrival at Kensington Palace, Carole was greeted by the usual staff with their characteristic warm professionalism. The palace, with its red brick exterior and white stone detailing, had become almost like a second home to her over the years. She knew which portraits lined the corridors, recognized the scent of the particular wood polish used on the antique furniture, and could navigate to Catherine and William's private apartments without guidance. Today, however, She was escorted to a different room, the formal drawing room typically reserved for official meetings with dignitaries. The change in venue sent another small wave of apprehension through her chest. The room, decorated in rich burgundy and gold with portraits of previous royals gazing down from ornate frames, felt more imposing than the cozy family spaces where they usually gathered. Catherine and William were already seated on one of the silk-upholstered sofas, and their expressions immediately told Carole that whatever they needed to discuss was indeed serious. Catherine, usually quick to embrace her mother with genuine warmth, offered a more reserved greeting, not cold, but carrying the weight of official business. William stood as she entered, his military bearing more pronounced than usual, a subtle signal that they were operating in formal mode rather than casual family time. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Carole," William said, gesturing for her to take the armchair opposite them. "I know this was short notice, but we felt it was important to speak with you as soon as possible about a rather delicate situation that's developed." Catherine leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped in her lap. "Mummy, you know we value your discretion above everything else. What we're about to discuss absolutely cannot leave this room until we determine the best way forward." The formality of their language, so different from their usual family conversations filled with laughter and casual updates about the children, made Carole's pulse quicken. She nodded solemnly, drawing on decades of experience in handling confidential business matters. "Of course. You have my complete attention and absolute discretion." William exchanged a glance with Catherine before beginning. "We've received intelligence from our security team that suggests there may be threats directed not just toward Catherine and myself, but toward our extended family members as well. Specifically, there have been concerning communications mentioning you and Michael, as well as Pippa and James." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Carole felt her breath catch but forced herself to remain composed. In the business world, she had learned to process shocking information without showing immediate emotional reactions, and that skill served her well now. "What kind of threats?" she asked quietly, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Catherine answered, her professional training evident in her calm delivery of disturbing facts. "The communications appear to be from an organized group rather than a single individual. They've made specific references to our family structure, including details about party pieces operations and your regular routines.
The security services are taking these very seriously because of the level of detail involved."
William continued. "The intelligence suggests that targeting family members who aren't under direct royal protection might be seen as easier than approaching Catherine or myself directly."
The theory is that causing distress to family members could be used as psychological pressure. Carole absorbed this information with the same methodical approach she used for complex business challenges. "What does this mean practically? What kind of changes are we looking at?" "Enhanced security measures, certainly," William replied. "But there's something else we need to discuss. The palace security team, in consultation with the Metropolitan Police, has recommended that for the immediate future, when you visit any royal residences, you be afforded the same protection protocols as other high-risk individuals." Catherine took over, her voice carrying both professional necessity and personal concern. "This would mean using different entrances, having security escorts, and following specific procedures that might feel quite formal compared to how we've always done things. The important thing to understand," William added, "is that this isn't about changing who you are within our family. You'll always be Catherine's mother first and foremost. But we need to ensure your safety, and that might require some adjustments to how things appear from the outside." Carole sat quietly for a moment, processing the implications. She thought about her grandchildren, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and how this might affect their natural, unguarded relationships. She considered her business, her community involvement, and the simple pleasure of being able to visit her daughter without elaborate precautions. "How long might these measures be necessary?" she asked. "That's impossible to say with certainty," Catherine replied honestly. "The security services are working to identify and neutralize the source of these threats, but they've advised us to assume this could be our new normal for the foreseeable future." The phrase "new normal" resonated with particular weight. Carole remembered when Catherine first began dating William how gradually their family life had shifted to accommodate the reality of royal attention. Each milestone, the engagement, the wedding, the births of the grandchildren, had brought new adjustments, new considerations, new protocols to learn and follow. "I want to be completely clear about something," William said, his tone becoming more personal, less official. "None of this changes how Catherine and I feel about having you so involved in our lives and the children's lives. If anything, it makes us more determined to ensure that you can continue to be the grandmother and mother you've always been, just with better protection." Catherine nodded emphatically. The children adore their Granny Carole. They need that stability and that connection to a more normal world. We won't let security concerns take that away from them or from us. The afternoon stretched on as they discussed practical details. Carole would need to coordinate her schedule more closely with the palace security team. Visits would require advance notice, even spontaneous ones. Her daily routines, shopping, business meetings, social engagements would all be subject to security review. "There's one more thing," Catherine said as their meeting began to wind down. "Next week we have a formal ceremony at Windsor Castle. It's a small gathering but important for diplomatic reasons. We'd like you to attend, and it would be an opportunity to implement these new security protocols in a controlled environment." William added, "It would also send a clear message to anyone watching that attempts to intimidate our family will not succeed. Your presence at official events, treated with appropriate security and respect, demonstrates that we stand together." As Carole prepared to leave, Catherine walked her to the door of the drawing room, and for the first time that afternoon, dropped the formal tone completely. "I'm sorry about all this, Mummy," she said, her voice carrying the same vulnerability it had held when she was a little girl facing a playground bully. "I hate that our choices affect your freedom." Carole pulled her daughter into a proper embrace, the kind they'd shared countless times over the years. "Darling girl, freedom isn't about going wherever you want, whenever you want. Freedom is about being able to love your family and support them through whatever comes. That's never going to change." The drive home that evening was contemplative rather than anxious. Carole watched the London landscape pass by. The familiar landmarks, the bustling pedestrians, the ordinary rhythm of city life that would continue regardless of the extraordinary circumstances now surrounding her family. She thought about the little girl who had once climbed into her bed during thunderstorms, afraid of the lightning flashing outside their cottage windows. That same little girl was now preparing to be queen, facing threats that made childhood fear of storms seem quaint in comparison. But at its core, Carole realized her role remained exactly what it had always been, to provide love, stability, and unwavering support, regardless of the external circumstances. When she arrived home, Michael was waiting in their living room, reading the evening paper by the fireplace. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know about the seriousness of the conversation she'd just had. "Well," he said simply, setting down the paper and opening his arms for her. She settled beside him on their familiar sofa, surrounded by family photos and the comfortable accumulation of a lifetime together. "We're going to need to make some adjustments," she said quietly. "But nothing that matters most is going to change." That night, as Carole reviewed Party Piece's business reports, a routine that helped ground her in the practical world she'd built independent of royal connections, she found herself thinking about the ceremony Catherine had mentioned. A formal event at Windsor Castle with new security protocols, new procedures, new ways of navigating the balance between public duty and private relationships. She had no way of knowing that this ceremony would mark a turning point, not just for her own role within the royal framework, but for how the monarchy itself approached the delicate integration of modern family structures with ancient traditions. The threats that had prompted these security measures would eventually be resolved, but the precedents established in response to them would reshape royal protocol for years to come. The last entry in her business diary that night was simple: meeting with C&W, new security arrangements effective immediately. But beneath those practical words lay the understanding that her family was entering uncharted territory, where love and duty would be tested in ways none of them had anticipated. As she prepared for bed, Carole looked out her bedroom window toward the distant lights of London, where her daughter was likely tucking her grandchildren into their beds at Kensington Palace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, and new ways of protecting what mattered most. But tonight, she felt only the steady certainty that had carried her through every major transition in her life. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family. The following Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that would set the wheels of protocol change in motion. Carole was reviewing inventory reports for Party Pieces when her assistant, Jenny, knocked on the office door with an expression that suggested something unusual was happening. "Mrs. Middleton, there's a gentleman on the line who says he's calling from Buckingham Palace. He asked specifically to speak with you about arrangements for this week." Carole felt a familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with slight apprehension. Since the security briefing at Kensington Palace, she had been expecting more formal contact from various royal officers, but hearing Buckingham Palace still carried weight that years of family connection hadn't diminished. The voice on the other end was crisp and authoritative, belonging to Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, Deputy Master of the Household at Buckingham Palace. "Mrs. Middleton, I trust you're well. I'm calling to discuss the arrangements for your attendance at Wednesday's ceremony at Windsor Castle." "Of course," Carole replied, settling into a desk chair and reaching for a notepad. I understand there will be new security procedures to follow. Indeed. However, I wanted to personally walk you through what will be different from your previous visits, as we want to ensure you're completely comfortable with the new arrangements. Sir Geoffrey's tone carried the kind of respectful formality usually reserved for heads of state or senior diplomatic figures. He explained that instead of using the family entrance at Windsor Castle, a modest side door that connected to the private apartments where she had always entered for casual visits, she would be escorted through the grand entrance. This was the ceremonial doorway used for state occasions, complete with its impressive stone archway, royal coat of arms, and the kind of grandeur designed to impress foreign dignitaries. The security team has determined that the grand entrance provides better sightlines and more controlled access, Sir Geoffrey continued. You'll be met by Palace Guard Captain Morrison, who will personally escort you through the entrance procedures. Carole paused in her note-taking. In all her years of visiting royal residences, she had never been assigned a personal escort, let alone a Palace Guard captain. I want to make sure I understand correctly. This escort arrangement, is this standard for the new security level, or is there something specific I should be aware of, Mrs. Middleton? I want to be completely transparent with you, Sir Geoffrey replied, and she could hear him choosing his words carefully. The security assessment has classified you as what we term a protected family member, which is actually a new designation that's been created specifically for this situation. It's not quite the same as protection for working royals, but it's significantly elevated from our previous arrangements. The term protected family member was new to Carole, and she made a note to ask Catherine about its implications. In her business experience, when organizations created new categories or classifications, it usually meant they were adapting to circumstances they hadn't encountered before. The interesting thing, Sir Geoffrey continued, is that this designation comes with certain protocols that haven't been used in quite this way before. The grand entrance escort, for instance, is typically reserved for visiting heads of state or senior government ministers. We're adapting it for family members who need enhanced security. After the call ended, Carole sat quietly in her office, looking out at the familiar gardens of her Bucklebury property. The contrast between her peaceful, ordinary surroundings and the grand formality being planned for her visit felt almost surreal. She thought about the early days of Catherine's relationship with William, when the most complicated protocol she'd needed to learn was which fork to use for the fish course at formal dinners. Tuesday brought another call, this time from Catherine herself, and the conversation revealed just how unprecedented the current situation had become. "Mummy, I wanted to check in about tomorrow's arrangements," Catherine said, her voice carrying a mixture of concern and something else, perhaps excitement. "I know all this formal protocol must feel overwhelming." "I'm managing, darling," Carole replied. "Though I have to admit, being escorted through the grand entrance feels rather dramatic for a family visit." Catherine laughed, and for a moment she sounded like the young woman who used to call home from university with stories about her classes and friends. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. William and I have been discussing this with Granny, with the Queen, and we've realized that what's happening with your security situation is highlighting some interesting gaps in how we handle extended family."
What kind of gaps?
Well, traditionally, you're either a working royal with full protection and protocol, or you're a private family member who attends events but doesn't receive any special treatment. There's never really been a middle ground for people who need security but aren't working royals themselves. Carole could hear Catherine shifting into what she privately called her princess mode, the analytical, thoughtful approach she took when discussing matters that affected the monarchy's operations. "The security team's recommendations have actually forced us to create new protocols," Catherine continued. "And Granny finds it quite interesting from a constitutional perspective. She's been reviewing similar situations in other European monarchies to see how they handle extended family protection." This was news to Carole.
The idea that her security needs had reached the level of constitutional consideration felt both flattering and slightly overwhelming.
What did she discover? That most monarchies have much clearer guidelines for protecting non-working family members than we do.
The Swedish and Norwegian royal families, for instance, have established procedures for when extended family members need temporary or permanent security upgrades. Catherine paused, and Carole could sense there was more to this conversation than simple information sharing. "Mummy, there's something else. Tomorrow's ceremony isn't just about implementing your security protocols. It's also serving as a sort of test case for how these new procedures work in practice. There will be other family members attending. Princess Anne will be there, as well as the Wessexes. And they're very interested to see how the enhanced protocols function."
The weight of being a test case settled on Carole's shoulders.
She had always prided herself on handling royal situations with grace, but knowing that senior royals would be evaluating the success of new protocols added pressure she hadn't anticipated. "What exactly will they be observing?" she asked. "How smoothly the security procedures integrate with the ceremony itself, whether the additional formality feels natural or forced, and most importantly, whether you feel comfortable and respected throughout the process," Catherine explained. "William and I have been very clear that these new protocols should enhance your experience, not make it feel like you're being processed through some bureaucratic system." That evening, Carole spent considerable time choosing her outfit for the ceremony. The occasion was described as semi-formal, which in royal terms could mean anything from a business suit to a cocktail dress. More importantly, she would be photographed entering through the grand entrance, and those images would likely be studied by royal watchers and protocol experts. She finally settled on an elegant burgundy coat dress with matching accessories, sophisticated enough for the formal setting, but warm enough in color to reflect her personality. The dress had a structured silhouette that would photograph well, but comfortable fabric that would allow her to move naturally through whatever procedures awaited her. Michael watched her preparations with the bemused affection of a man who had learned, over years of marriage, when to offer advice and when to simply provide moral support. "You look like someone who belongs walking through grand entrances," he said as she adjusted her pearl necklace one final time. "I feel like someone who's about to be part of a very expensive experiment," she replied with a nervous laugh. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made everything seem sharper and more significant. Carole's driver, now a security-cleared professional rather than their usual local car service, arrived precisely at the appointed time. The drive to Windsor Castle took the same route she had travelled many times before, but the presence of an additional security vehicle following at a discreet distance served as a constant reminder that this visit was unlike any previous one. As they approached the castle grounds, Carole could see the difference immediately. Instead of directing her to the small family parking area she knew well, they were guided toward the formal arrival area used for state visits. The contrast was striking. Broader driveways, more impressive landscaping, and sightlines designed to showcase the castle's most magnificent architectural features. Captain Morrison was waiting precisely where Sir Geoffrey had indicated he would be, positioned at the foot of the stone steps leading to the grand entrance. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 40s, with the kind of bearing that suggested years of military service before joining the royal household staff. His uniform was immaculate, and his greeting struck the perfect balance between formal respect and personal warmth. "Mrs. Middleton, welcome to Windsor Castle. I'm Captain Morrison, and I'll be escorting you through today's arrival procedures." As they began the walk toward the entrance, Carole became acutely aware of the visual impact of the scene they were creating. The grand entrance, with its soaring stone archway and elaborate carved details, was designed to impress and intimidate. The red carpet that had been laid for her approach was the same quality used for visiting heads of state. The two guards flanking the doorway stood at attention with the precision reserved for the most formal occasions. "Middleton," Captain Morrison said quietly as they approached the entrance. "I want you to know that everyone involved in today's arrangements understands the unique nature of this situation. We're committed to ensuring that the enhanced security feels respectful rather than overwhelming." His words were clearly chosen to reassure her, but they also highlighted just how unusual this situation was for everyone involved. As they reached the threshold of the grand entrance, Carole caught a glimpse of movement in one of the upper windows of the castle. A figure in the window appeared to be observing the arrival, someone who had positioned themselves to witness this unprecedented moment. The entrance itself was more elaborate than anything Carole had experienced in her years of royal family visits. Instead of the simple badge scanning and informal greetings she was accustomed to, there was a formal announcement of her arrival, a brief inspection of credentials, and a ceremonial acknowledgement from the guards. "Their Royal Highnesses are expecting you in the blue drawing room," Captain Morrison informed her as they passed through the entrance hall. "However, before we proceed, the security team would like to brief you on the layout for today's ceremony and your positioning during the formal portions." The security briefing took place in a small antechamber near the main ceremonial rooms. Two additional security personnel joined Captain Morrison, and they showed Carole detailed diagrams of the ceremony setup, indicating where she would be positioned, which route she should use for movement, and what signals to watch for if any security adjustments became necessary. The level of detail was extraordinary. They had mapped not just her seat during the ceremony, but her path to that seat, the locations of all exits, the positions of other family members, and even contingency plans for various scenarios. It was more comprehensive than the security briefing she remembered from Catherine and William's wedding, and that had been a global media event. Mrs. Middleton, one of the security officers said, "We want to emphasize that all of these procedures are precautionary. Today's ceremony is considered low risk, but we're using it as an opportunity to establish protocols that will serve you well in any future high-profile situations." The phrase future high-profile situations caught Carole's attention. It suggested that the palace was planning for her continued involvement in formal royal events, not just managing a temporary security concern. As they concluded the briefing and prepared to join the other guests, Captain Morrison made one final comment that would stay with Carole long after the day's events concluded. "Mrs. Middleton, in my 15 years of service with the royal household, I've escorted many distinguished guests through these procedures. I want you to know that the care and attention being given to your security arrangements reflects the genuine respect and affection their Royal Highnesses have for you, as well as their commitment to ensuring that family relationships remain strong despite these additional complications." Walking through the corridors toward the blue drawing room, Carole reflected on how much her life had changed since that early morning phone call just a week ago. The woman who had built a successful business through attention to detail and careful planning was now the subject of royal security protocols and constitutional precedent setting. But more than that, she was a mother and grandmother whose family happened to include the future King and Queen of England. Today's ceremony would test whether the ancient institution of the monarchy could adapt its traditions to protect and honor the modern reality of extended family relationships. As they approached the blue drawing room, where Catherine, William, and the other royal family members were waiting, Carole squared her shoulders and prepared to take her place in what felt like a new chapter of royal history. Behind her, through the window she had noticed earlier, someone was still watching, still observing this unprecedented integration of enhanced security, family affection, and constitutional tradition. The ceremony itself was about to begin, but Carole realized that the most significant part of the day had already taken place. She had successfully navigated the grand entrance, established new protocols that could serve as a template for future similar situations, and proven that the monarchy's traditions could evolve to meet contemporary challenges without losing their essential dignity and purpose. The Blue Drawing Room at Windsor Castle had hosted centuries of royal gatherings, but the atmosphere on this particular Wednesday morning carried an unusual undercurrent of anticipation. As Carole entered the elegant space, with its signature blue silk wall coverings and portraits of long-deceased monarchs gazing down from gilded frames, she immediately sensed that this was more than a routine ceremonial event. Catherine spotted her first and moved gracefully across the room, her smile carrying both genuine warmth and a hint of relief. "Mummy, how did the new arrival procedures feel?" "Not too overwhelming, I hope?" Before Carole could respond, Princess Anne approached with characteristic directness. "Carole, I understand you're serving as our guinea pig today for these new security protocols. How are our people treating you?" The Princess Royal's informal question, delivered with her typical no-nonsense approach, immediately put Carole at ease. In all her interactions with Anne over the years, she had appreciated the older woman's straightforward manner and genuine interest in practical matters. "Everyone has been wonderfully professional," Carole replied. "Though I have to admit, the grand entrance felt rather grand indeed." Anne laughed, a sound that carried genuine amusement. "I imagine it did. I've been using that entrance for state occasions for 40 years, and it still makes me feel like I'm in a period drama. The key is to remember that all the ceremony is about respect. Respect for the institution, for the guests, and in your case, respect for the important role you play in our family's stability." William joined their small group, and Carole noticed immediately that he seemed more relaxed than he had during their serious conversation at Kensington Palace the week before. "How was Captain Morrison? He's one of our best. We specifically requested him for today." "He was exceptional," Carole said honestly. "Very professional. But he also made sure I understood that all the formality was meant to be respectful, not intimidating." "That's exactly what we were hoping for," Catherine said, lowering her voice slightly. "William and I have been discussing these new protocols with other family members, and there's genuine interest in how they work. If they're successful, they could be adapted for other situations where non-working family members need enhanced security." The Earl of Wessex approached their conversation, and Carole was struck by how different this gathering felt from typical family events. Instead of casual conversations about the children or weekend plans, there was an undercurrent of professional assessment, as if everyone was simultaneously participating in a family ceremony and evaluating a new business process. "Carole," Edward said with his characteristic gentle manner, "Sophie and I were just discussing how these enhanced protocols might affect other extended family members in the future. It's quite fascinating from an organizational perspective." Sophie, Countess of Wessex, joined them with 2 cups of tea. What Edward means is that we're all rather impressed by how smoothly this seems to be working. There have been discussions for years about how to better integrate and protect extended family members, but it took your specific situation to actually create workable solutions. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an equerry who announced that the ceremony would begin in 10 minutes. As the group began to move toward the ceremony room, Catherine fell into step beside her mother. "Mummy, there's something I want to mention before we begin," she said quietly. "During the ceremony, you'll be seated in what's called the Family Royal section, which is different from where you've sat at previous events. It's closer to the official participants and comes with certain protocols." Carole raised an eyebrow. "More protocols?" "Nothing complicated," Catherine assured her quickly, "but you'll be announced when you take your seat, which doesn't usually happen for non-working family members. It's part of the enhanced status that comes with your new security classification." The ceremony room was smaller than Carole had expected, but beautifully appointed, with dark wood paneling and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the assembled guests. There were perhaps 50 people present, a mix of government officials, military leaders, and royal family members. As Catherine had warned, when Carole was escorted to her seat, there was indeed a formal announcement: Mrs. Michael Middleton. The announcement was brief but carried the same weight as those for the other distinguished guests. Several heads turned in her direction, and she could see curiosity in their expressions. Clearly, her prominent placement and formal introduction was being noted by people who understood royal protocol. The ceremony itself was a presentation of honors to several military officers and civil servants who had demonstrated exceptional service during recent international crises. King Charles, who had arrived just before the ceremony began, presided with the dignified formality that had become his signature style since taking the throne. From her seat in the Family Royal section, Carole had an excellent view, not just of the ceremony, but of the other participants. She noticed that several senior government officials were observing the royal family dynamics with the keen attention of people whose job it was to understand power structures and relationships. During a particularly moving moment in the ceremony, when a young army captain was being honored for humanitarian work in disaster zones, Carole caught King Charles's eye across the room. He gave her a small, acknowledging nod that seemed to carry approval for her presence and participation in the formal proceedings. The gesture was subtle enough that most people probably didn't notice it, but Carole understood its significance. The king's public acknowledgement of her enhanced status within royal protocol was itself a form of endorsement for the new arrangements. As the ceremony concluded and guests began to move toward the reception area, Carole found herself approached by several people she didn't recognize, government officials and military leaders who had clearly been briefed on the changes in her status.
"Mrs. P. Middleton," said a distinguished woman in her 60s wearing the kind of understated but expensive clothing that suggested senior civil service.
"I'm Penelope Hartridge from the Cabinet Office. We've been following the development of these new family protection protocols with great interest."
The woman's approach was friendly but professional, and Carole sensed she was being evaluated as much as greeted. "It's been quite an education for me as well," she replied carefully. "I imagine so. From our perspective, these adaptations to royal protocol reflect very thoughtful modernization of security practices. The balance between family integration and institutional protection is quite sophisticated." Another official joined their conversation, introducing himself as a representative from the Home Office. "Mrs. Middleton, we're particularly impressed by how naturally these enhanced protocols seem to be working. Often when we implement new security measures, there's a period of awkwardness as everyone adjusts." Carole realized that her experience today was being viewed as a successful pilot program for broader changes in how the royal family handled extended family security. The thought was both flattering and slightly daunting. The key, she found herself saying, has been that everyone involved has made it clear that the security enhancements are meant to enable family relationships, not complicate them. The Home Office representative nodded approvingly. "Exactly the right approach. Security should be invisible when it's working properly." As the reception continued, Carole noticed that she was being included in conversations typically reserved for working royals. Government officials sought her opinion on community issues related to her business experience. Military leaders asked about her observations of young people's career aspirations. Cultural representatives discussed her insights into family enterprises and entrepreneurship. It was a subtle but significant shift. Instead of being acknowledged primarily as Catherine's mother, she was being engaged as someone whose own experiences and perspectives had value within royal circles. Catherine appeared at her elbow during one particularly engaged conversation about small business challenges with a group of economic advisors. "I see you're making quite an impression," she said quietly with evident pride in her voice. "I think I'm surprising myself," Carole replied honestly. "I didn't expect to find the policy discussion so interesting." "That's because you have something valuable to contribute. Your experience building party pieces from nothing gives you insights that most people in these circles don't have." As the reception began to wind down, Princess Anne approached Carole once more, this time with a more serious expression. "Carole, I wanted to have a word about today's success," she said, guiding her to a quieter corner of the room.
The new protocols have worked exceptionally well, and that's created some interesting opportunities.
Carole waited, sensing that Anne had something specific in mind. "There's been discussion about formalizing your role in certain types of events."
"Not as a working royal, but as what we might call a senior family representative. It would mean more events like today's, more formal recognition, and expanded security arrangements." The proposal caught Carole completely off guard. "I'm not sure I understand what that would mean practically." "It would mean that when there are events where the royal family wants to demonstrate the strength of our extended family relationships, you might be called upon to participate in an official capacity. State dinners occasionally, important charitable events, some ceremonial functions." Anne paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. The monarchy's relationship with the public has evolved significantly in recent years. People are more interested in the human side of royal life, in how we balance duty with genuine family relationships. Your natural grace in situations like today demonstrates that it's possible to enhance royal tradition rather than simply maintain it. The conversation was interrupted by William's approach, and Carole could see from his expression that he had something important to share. "Mummy, I've just had a fascinating conversation with the palace communications team," he said, his voice carrying barely contained excitement. "The initial feedback on today's arrangements has been overwhelmingly positive."
Catherine joined their group, holding a tablet that showed early media coverage of the ceremony.
"Look at this," she said, showing them the screen. "The coverage is focusing not just on the honors ceremony itself, but on the seamless integration of enhanced family security. Several outlets are calling it modernization done right." The tablet displayed images from the ceremony, including several photos of Carole during various moments of the event. In each image, she looked comfortable, engaged, and entirely appropriate to the formal setting. The visual message was clear: enhanced security and family inclusion could work together successfully. "More importantly," William continued, "the security assessment is that today's procedures exceeded expectations. All the objectives were met, the enhanced protocols worked smoothly, and there were no operational issues." Princess Anne smiled with evident satisfaction. "Which means we've successfully established a new template for how the royal family can adapt to contemporary security challenges while maintaining our essential traditions." As the day's events concluded and Carole prepared for her departure through the grand entrance once again, she reflected on how much had changed since that first phone call from James Crawford just a week earlier. What had begun as a response to security threats had evolved into an opportunity to strengthen and modernize royal family relationships. Captain Morrison escorted her back through the grand entrance with the same professional courtesy he had shown upon her arrival, but now the procedures felt familiar rather than intimidating. "Mrs. Middleton," he said as they reached her car, "I hope you found today's arrangements satisfactory. The feedback we've received suggests that this approach will serve as a model for similar situations in the future." As her car pulled away from Windsor Castle, Carole looked back at the magnificent building where her daughter would someday live as queen. Today had proven that the ancient institution of monarchy could adapt to protect and honor modern family relationships without sacrificing its essential dignity. But more than that, she had discovered that her own experiences and perspectives had value within royal circles that extended far beyond her role as Catherine's mother. The conversations at today's reception had engaged her as a businesswoman, a community leader, and someone whose insights could contribute to important policy discussions. The drive home was quiet and contemplative, but not anxious as it had been the week before. Instead of worrying about unknown challenges ahead, Carole found herself considering the unexpected opportunities that had emerged from what had initially seemed like a concerning situation. By the time she reached Bucklebury, the late afternoon light was casting long shadows across her familiar gardens, but everything looked slightly different now, viewed from the perspective of someone who had successfully navigated not just enhanced royal security protocols, but an entirely new role within the extended royal family structure. 3 days after the successful ceremony at Windsor Castle, Carole received a call that would mark the true beginning of her transformed relationship with the royal family, Sir Geoffrey Hartwell's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been present in their previous, more protocol-focused conversations. Mrs. Middleton, I hope you've had time to recover from Wednesday's events. I'm calling because we've received some rather extraordinary feedback that I thought you should hear directly. Carole settled into her office chair, surrounded by the familiar chaos of party pieces business, order forms, color swatches for upcoming events, and photographs of recent celebrations she had helped coordinate. The contrast between her practical business world and the formal royal environment she had navigated just days before seemed almost surreal. The feedback has come from multiple sources, Sir Geoffrey continued. But the most significant response has been from the diplomatic corps who attended the ceremony. Several ambassadors specifically commented on what they described as sophisticated family integration and evolutionary tradition. He paused, allowing her to process this unexpected information. What they observed, Mrs.
Middleton was a royal family that has successfully adapted its protocols to contemporary realities without compromising institutional dignity. Your presence and participation demonstrated that the monarchy can evolve while maintaining its essential character.
Carole found herself genuinely surprised by this interpretation of events. I had no idea that foreign diplomats would be paying such attention to family dynamics. Oh, they absolutely do, Sir Geoffrey replied with evident amusement. The stability and adaptability of the British monarchy is of considerable interest to other governments. What they witnessed on Wednesday suggested that our institution remains robust and capable of thoughtful change. The conversation continued with Sir Geoffrey explaining that several European royal families had already inquired about the new protocols, seeking to understand how Britain was balancing enhanced security with family inclusion. The Swedish royal court in particular has requested a briefing on our approach. They're facing similar challenges with extended family security and are interested in adapting our solutions. After the call ended, Carole sat quietly in her office, trying to absorb the broader implications of her personal experience. What had felt like a family matter, with some unusual security requirements, was apparently being viewed as a successful case study in institutional modernization. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of her assistant, Jenny, carrying a large bouquet of flowers in an envelope marked with the royal cipher. "These just arrived by special delivery," Jenny said, her eyes wide with curiosity. The delivery person was very formal about making sure they reached you personally. The flowers were beautiful but understated. White roses and greenery arranged with the kind of elegant simplicity that suggested royal florists. The accompanying note was written on thick, cream-coloured paper in Catherine's familiar handwriting. "Dearest Mummy," the note read, "William and I wanted you to know how proud we are of your grace and poise during Wednesday's ceremony. You've helped us prove that our family's strength is one of the monarchy's greatest assets. With all our love, Catherine and William." Below their signatures, there was a postscript in William's handwriting. "P.S. Granny has asked to speak with you at your convenience. She was quite impressed with the diplomatic feedback we've received." The prospect of a personal conversation with Queen Camilla about her role in recent events felt both flattering and slightly intimidating. Carole had interacted with Camilla many times over the years at family gatherings, and their relationship had always been warm and natural. But discussing matters of institutional significance would be different from chatting about grandchildren over Sunday lunch. She called the number provided in William's note and arranged to visit Queen Camilla the following afternoon at Clarence House. The timing would work well, as she had a party pieces consultation in London that morning and could easily extend her stay for the royal appointment. Thursday afternoon's drive through London to Clarence House took her through the heart of the city she had come to know well through years of royal family visits. But today felt different, as if her perspective on these familiar streets had shifted subtly but significantly. Clarence House, the elegant Georgian mansion that served as Queen Camilla's official residence, had always felt more approachable to Carole than some of the grander royal properties. Its human scale and beautiful gardens created an atmosphere that encouraged comfortable conversation rather than formal protocol. Queen Camilla was waiting in her private sitting room, a space decorated with personal photographs, comfortable furniture, and the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. She rose to greet Carole with genuine warmth, embracing her with the natural affection that had developed between them over the years. "Carole, my dear, thank you for making time to see me."
I hope you don't mind my requesting this conversation, but I felt we should discuss the rather remarkable events of recent days. They settled into comfortable armchairs positioned near the window overlooking the garden, and Queen Camilla poured tea from a delicate porcelain service that had clearly seen many similar conversations.
I wanted to speak with you personally because what happened on Wednesday has implications that extend beyond your own experience, she began, her tone warm but serious. The success of the new protocols has created opportunities that I believe we should explore together. Carole waited, sensing that this conversation would be more significant than social pleasantries. The diplomatic response to Wednesday's ceremony has been quite extraordinary, Queen Camilla continued. But more than that, the domestic response has been equally positive. The public seems to appreciate seeing the royal family's genuine family relationships treated with appropriate respect and protection. She paused to sip her tea, gathering her thoughts before continuing. Charles and I have been discussing this with William and Catherine, and we believe that your successful navigation of the enhanced protocols has opened a door to broader changes in how we approach extended family involvement in royal activities. Queen Camilla's next words would prove to be prophetic in ways that none of them could have anticipated at the time. We're considering establishing what we might call associate family roles, positions that would allow non-working members of the extended royal family to participate more formally in certain types of events and activities. Not full working royal status, but recognized roles that come with appropriate security, protocol support, and public acknowledgement. The concept was entirely new to Carole, and she found herself both intrigued and cautious about its implications. What would that mean practically? She asked. It would mean that you might be invited to participate in state dinners when there are business or entrepreneurship themes that could benefit from your expertise. You might attend certain charitable events where your business background would add value to the royal family's engagement. You might represent the family at community events where your natural warmth and authenticity would be particularly appropriate. Queen Camilla leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more personal. Carole, one of the things that impressed everyone about Wednesday's ceremony was how naturally you fit into the formal environment while maintaining your own authentic personality. That's a rare skill, and it's exactly what the modern monarchy needs. The conversation continued for over an hour, covering practical details about how such expanded involvement might work, what kinds of support would be provided, and how these new roles would be presented to the public. The key principle, Queen Camilla explained, is that these would be roles that enhance and support the working royals' activities rather than competing with them. Your involvement would always complement Catherine and William's work, never overshadow or duplicate it. As their meeting concluded, Queen Camilla made one final point that would resonate with Carole long after she left Clarence House. My dear, the monarchy's greatest strength has always been its ability to evolve while maintaining its essential purpose. What you've accomplished in the past week, successfully integrating enhanced security with natural family relationships, represents exactly the kind of thoughtful evolution that will ensure the institution's continued relevance and effectiveness. The drive home that evening gave Carole time to process the extraordinary conversation she had just experienced. The woman who had built party pieces from a kitchen table business to a successful enterprise was being invited to contribute her skills and experience to the royal family's public service in ways that had never existed before. But more than the professional opportunity, she was moved by the recognition that her authentic personality and natural approach to relationships were being valued as assets rather than limitations within royal protocol. Over the weekend, Michael and Carole had several long conversations about the potential changes these new opportunities might bring to their lives. The enhanced security arrangements were already requiring adjustments to their routines, and expanded royal involvement would bring additional considerations. The important thing, Michael said as they walked through their garden on Sunday morning, is that these opportunities seem to be built around who you already are, rather than asking you to become someone different.
That's exactly what feels right about it, Carole replied.
When Queen Camilla described these possible roles, they sounded like extensions of things I already do and care about, just in different settings. Monday brought news that would demonstrate just how prescient Queen Camilla's vision had been. Catherine called with barely contained excitement in her voice. Mummy, we've just received confirmation that the Swedish Royal Court wants to arrange a formal consultation about our new family security protocols. They're specifically interested in meeting with you to understand how the enhanced procedures work from the family member's perspective. This international interest in her experience was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. What would that involve? They're proposing a visit to London next month, with meetings at the palace to review the protocols and procedures, but they also want to have informal conversations with you about how these changes feel from a personal and family perspective. Catherine paused, and Carole could hear the smile in her voice as she continued. William and I think it's wonderful that your experience is contributing to improvements in how royal families across Europe handle these challenges. You're not just helping our family adapt, you're helping establish new standards for modern monarchy.
As the weeks that followed would prove, this initial success had indeed established Carole as an inadvertent expert in balancing family relationships with royal protocol. The Swedish consultation led to similar inquiries from Norwegian and Dutch royal households, each seeking to understand how the British approach might be adapted to their own circumstances. But perhaps the most significant change was the gradual shift in how Carole herself viewed her role within the extended royal family. The experience had transformed her from someone who carefully navigated royal protocol to avoid making mistakes into someone whose natural instincts and authentic approach were recognized as valuable contributions to the monarchy's evolution. The Tuesday morning that had seemed so significant just weeks earlier, when she would walk through the grand entrance with a guard escort while Queen Camilla watched from her window, now appeared to be just the beginning of a much larger transformation. As she sat in her Bucklebury office on a quiet Thursday afternoon, reviewing party pieces business while simultaneously planning her schedule around upcoming royal commitments, Carole reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a security concern and evolved into an opportunity to help modernize one of the world's oldest institutions. The threats that had initially prompted the enhanced security measures had been successfully addressed by law enforcement, but the protocols and relationships that had developed in response to those threats had proven to have value far beyond their original purpose. Looking out her office window toward the London road that now led not just to family visits but to formal royal duties, Carole smiled at the thought that her daughter's fairy tale marriage had somehow extended to include her own transformation from successful businesswoman to inadvertent royal protocol innovator. The phone on her desk rang, displaying a number she now recognized immediately: the direct line from Kensington Palace. As she reached to answer what would undoubtedly be another request for her participation in some aspect of royal family evolution, Carole felt nothing but gratitude for the unexpected adventure that had begun with a simple security concern and had somehow become a new chapter in the ongoing story of a modern monarchy learning to embrace change while honoring tradition. "Good afternoon," she answered, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had discovered that authenticity and adaptability could be perfectly compatible with even the most ancient protocols.
This is Carole Middleton,